Okay, so this week is Parshas Chaye Sarah, which is talking about the life of Sarah, but it's actually after her life. It's in her death. We starts off by saying that she lived 127 years, 127 years. And really, in this week's Torah portion, we are going to discuss how this is really, we're given the tools that we need today as Jewish women in this darkness that we're going through to get out of this darkness. And I saw a very nice thing. Every time we see something in a physical way, we attribute it in a spiritual way as well. So the fact that the hostages are in these deep, dark tunnels, it was saying on our own spiritual level, there's something for us to do. That there's crevices within ourselves, these deep, dark parts within ourselves that we need to light up, that we need to bring out the light in it. And just like our soldiers are going to go into these tunnels successfully, God willing, and take out our hostages, extract the hostages from there, we also need to extract and take out from within ourselves the good, the light, and get rid of the darkness that's all around it. And the way that we're going to do it is through this week's Torah portion. We have the tools, 3 special tools, 3 laser beams of what we can use that we learned from Sarah about how we can use that in our own lives. One thing that was significant as I was driving here, sometimes you drive along the highway, and I was driving, I guess it's extra dark now because of the change. And it just felt so dark. And I was taking a different route. Like sometimes I was going through the side streets. This time I actually took the highway. And at one point, like between exits, it just felt like it was going on and on and on and on. There was no like signs. Sometimes you're on the interstate and it just feels like, and it's like right ahead. It's like very close by, but it just felt for a moment. It was almost like the Twilight Zone. Like it just felt like everything was so dark. You're just driving and driving and driving. And it's like the same road, and there's no cars around. I was the only one there, I guess because it's so dark. And you sometimes like lose your sense of track. Like, am I going to the right place? Like, you almost like, hold on, am I going to the right place? Where is it? I'm supposed to be here already. And I think sometimes in life we feel that way. We're going and driving and driving. And as we're driving, we don't really know, like, am I going in the right direction? Did I pass my exit? Did I go to the exit? Like, is it going the right way? And sometimes it's only once you actually see the exit, once you're actually off the exit, that oh, here it is. It's like right around the corner from here. And I think a little bit is like that in Sarah's life. She was working so hard for all these years. And then it talks about Chaye Sarah, and it's wondering, like, why does it call the Torah portion that talks about her death the life of Sarah, Chaye Sarah? Like it should be the death of Sarah, or talk about her life in the previous Torah portion where she was working with Avraham and she was side by side, and the change of the names. And we know that even she gave some of her spirituality to Avraham. Like we said, the name Sarai was changed. The Yud was taken off of Sarai and changed into a Hey. And that Yud, if you take Yud, is numerically 10 minus 5. She now got a Hey for Sarah. You're left with 5, which is a Hey that she gave to Avram, right? His name changed from Avram to Avraham. So she was giving some of her spirituality. She was sharing some of herself. And this was in order for him to have Yitzchak, the future of the Jewish people. She needed to share some of her spirituality with him, because some of the level that she was on a spiritual sense, in order for him to be worthy of having Yitzchak, and for both of them to have Yitzchak. So we see a lot of things in last week's Torah portion, which, we spoke about one thing last week, but this week is when she actually dies. And yet this week is where it calls the life of Sarah, rather than last week, rather than calling it the death of Sarah or something. It's talking about her life. But you see, that's how it is sometimes. You're traveling and traveling and going, and sometimes you don't know where you are. And you're losing your direction, or you're not sure where your direction, and you think you're going in the right way, But it's only when you finally arrive that you can look back in retrospect and say, yeah, the route was a good route. This was the route that I needed to take. And in Sarah's life, we see that after her death. That after her death, she actually was able to, if she was here, she would look back at her life and see the results, see the fruit of her life. So it's in this week's Torah portion that we see that she's actually buried in Ma'arat HaMachpelah, which Avram buys. This is part of the land of Israel. Avram buys it in order to say, this is our land, this is our tomb. We see her child Yitzchak finally marries Rivka in this week's Torah portion. And so we see a lot of the things that she worked so hard, and as a continuity for the Jewish people. So these are the things that she worked so hard on in her life that she never knew. Like when you're going and going, you don't really know, am I going in the right direction? Am I going to succeed? But it's once you get there that you can actually say, I got to my destination, I got to the right place. And now in Chayei Sarah, you can see the effects of her life. So in this week's Torah portion, in a way, she's even more alive than she was in last week's Torah portion, because you see what happened with her children. You see the results of all her hard work over all the years. This week's Torah portion also allows us to have something very significant in the sense that each and every one of us is given a certain heritage. I remember hello, welcome. I remember many years ago, I had done a book launch for one of my books. It was called Divine Whispers, and it was all about children, the stories from my children, stories from my parents, stories from, welcome. Too much, pouring a little bit of water. Yes, thank you. Yeah, perfect. No, that's perfect. Thank you. So I remember when I was doing this book launch, there was someone in the crowd who said to me something. She said, Amen. So this lady says to me, you have this heritage of your parents who obviously have the heritage of their parents, and Torah is a part of your life, but what kind of message do you give to people like me who don't have that, who doesn't feel like this is who I am, this is my heritage, this is my past, this is, my ancestors. And when she said that, I immediately thought of a story from the Rebbe where he met with someone, where someone was coming to him and said to him, this week we had a nice big minyan, we started a new center, and it was a center for people who without any background. And the Rebbe was like, what? And he repeated it, and he couldn't understand what was he saying that was so bothering the Rebbe, that Jews without any background? And the Rebbe corrected him and said, every Jew has background. Every Jew is a background. Every Jew is the child of Avraham, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Yaakov, the matriarchs and the patriarchs. Every one of us is that. So none of us should feel, I don't have ancestors, I don't have a background, I don't have a heritage. This is our heritage. And this is the week's Torah portion where we all got that heritage. We are all the children of Abraham and Sarah. And we see this coming out in the most magnificent ways. I mean, we're seeing a lot of the hatred that we were talking about, which is horrific, but we're also seeing a lot of the goodness and a lot of the understanding that this is who I am. I am a Jew. I was just speaking to a campus shliach. It was actually one that I'm going to be interviewing tomorrow morning. He was in Penn University, and it went viral. I don't know if you saw this link where he was putting on tefillin on someone. It was like, and the protesters were going right past him, and he just continued. Like, they just continued what they were doing. And it was just this picture of, here you have the darkness like all around and the light. And it was such an incredible kind of clip that it went viral. It was viral all over the place. And he said, like, after, the protests just happened to be going through that, where their stand was for tefillin, and they did get some sneers, they got people who insulted, even some physical things, but no one actually, the security stopped it. He says, and then there was actually a girl even there who, he said, would you like to light Shabbos candles? And she's like, well, can I light candles for Gaza? And he's like, well, light for peace. Why don't you light for peace? Light for all Jews who need peace in the world. And they started talking, and he, sometimes it's important to talk to people who are on the other side. And she was saying how she was actually a Holocaust survivor's child. Her grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and here she was, and he's like, what are you, when you're talking about freeing Gaza, what does that mean to you? And she says, well, to me it means that everyone should live in freedom. He says, that's not what they're saying when they're saying from the river to the sea. That's not that everyone should live in freedom. And they were talking, and he says at the end, he doesn't know that he convinced her. He doesn't know how much he educated her, not convinced, how much he educated her. But he did say that she took the Shabbos candles. So that was one thing. And so there's a lot of darkness all around, but it's that neshama that's coming out, even in the darkness, even someone who is protesting your people and marching with people who want our destruction and our death. Even such a person, the Yiddish neshama comes out and saying, I need this connection. I want this connection. And it could be ignorant and it doesn't know what to do and how to do it, but that connection is somehow coming out. And it's those who, it says those who, this is what the Christians are always saying, those who bless the children of Abraham will be blessed themselves. And we see that. I'm sure you've seen the clip where the cowboys from Arkansas.
Yes, I just saw it. Yes, a friend of ours sent it to us.
The cowboys from Arkansas and Montana.
For like shidduchim.
They're-
By any chance. I only have to do it.
They were nice and tall, right?
No, I just was wondering if they're Jewish.
They're
They're going to Israel.
They flew to Israel to help with the farms, to help with the agriculture. They were seen at JFK. They were seen at.
They're not Jewish. That's the wonder of it. They're not Jewish and they're not
Oh, that's cute. Nice.
People recognize Jews are Hanukah, we're the chosen people.
Here.
Yes.
You like to
Yes.
see them?
Yes. Yeah, it was all over today.
Taller than some.
And good hearts.
So some people do recognize, like we said so many times, it's that last vestige of evil that's just trying to fight. Just like before the flame of the candle goes out, it like starts flickering, and sometimes it flickers really wildly. And so that's the point, it's that last evil, because it knows that Mashiach is coming, and it's the Jewish people, goodness and light is going to permeate the entire reality and the entire world. So it's trying to just exert its last pathetic, anger or evil in the world. But, okay, so let's get into how this week's Torah portion really gives us the ammunition to fight this war in the best way as Jewish women. So we said this week's Torah portion is Avram sends Eliezer to get a wife for his son Yitzchak. And the commentaries say this was right after last week's Torah portion where God almost asked him to sacrifice his son. So Avram is thinking to himself, I better get him married. He was already in his 30s. I better get him married. At least he'll have children, and there will be the continuity of the Jewish people. Like, what am I waiting for? And so he sends his servant Eliezer to find the wife for Yitzchak. And the way that he chooses a wife is, what does he do? He does this test by the well. The one who feeds all his animals and is so kind to his animals, that's the one. And of course, Rivka is the one that does that. Now, this just teaches us, if you're looking for shidduchim, the main thing, the number one, the most important thing is kindness. This is kindness, good character traits. That's what we look for. Everything else is beneath that. But the most important thing is this kindness, and that's what Rivka was. In order to join the Jewish people, to be a part of the Jewish people, we needed that kindness. And sometimes we're kind to a fault, as we see, but it's that kindness that is part of us. So Rivka decides to come back to marry Yitzchak. And we're told Rivka's like this rose among thorns. She's like this Shoshana ben HaChaychim, this rose among thorns, where all around her were these thorns, this terrible environment, this immorality. She grew up in a home of such immorality. Her father was a thief. Her brother, we know, Lavan, was a thief. Completely immorality. They lived in Haran, which is called Charon Af Shel Olam, the anger of God in this world, because this was a place of such immorality. And it's important to look at Rivka and look at what she went through and see that it's specifically through what she went through that she became who she was. And this is an important lesson for us to realize we shouldn't just leave our past. We shouldn't just say, I grew from my past, or I grew from a certain experience, and now I want to disassociate from it. The idea is you don't leave anything from the past. You use your past to become who you are. And that's an important lesson that Rivka teaches us, not to ever think, I'm a different person now, I'm a changed person. You might be a changed person, that's great, but you're changed because of what you went through. What you went through contributes to who you are. The tests, the challenges, the struggles, the difficulties that you went through make you into who you are. It's like a person who's an addict says, and I'm no longer an addict. No, you are an addict. You are a recovered addict, but it's the addictions that made you into who you are now. It's the falling to bottom, dropping to very, very, very low that gave you the courage to be who you are. And this is the important lesson that we learn from Rivka. Learn from the past to become who you are. So Rivka comes to the home of Yitzchak, and it says Yitzchak brings her into the tent of his mother, and he marries her, and then he loves her. And then he's consoled over the death of his mother. His mother had recently passed away, and now he's finally consoled over her death. And it's interesting, the words that the Torah says, he brings her into the tent, he marries her, and then he loves her. And this is something that teaches us that Hollywood's way of looking at love is not the Torah way of looking at love. It's not that you fall in love and then you get married and then you live, happily ever after. The Torah way is, of course, you need to love the person that you're going to marry, but the love is something that has to grow. It grows deeper and deeper. The more you get to know the person, you have something in common, you love the person, you're attracted to the person, you decide to marry. Obviously, you try to marry someone for a reason, but once you are married, that's when the love really grows. So the way that Hollywood does it is kind of in reverse. It's that we find the person that we love, but it's not a matter of falling into love, but it's about cultivating the love, appreciating the love, growing the love, deepening the love. That's what a real marriage is. So Yitzchak takes her into the tent of his mother, and it says he loves her, he marries her, and he notices something incredible. And this is the three powerful things that we're going to talk about today. What does he notice? He notices that the three things that used to be in his mother's tent while she was alive three miraculous things have now returned. Those three miraculous things are, the challah. There was a blessing over her challah. She would bake challah and it would stay fresh from one week to the next. A tremendous blessing over her challah. One blessing. The neros, the candles. She would light candles, and again, the candles would burn brightly from week to week. A special miracle over the candles. And the third thing was the clouds of glory. There was a cloud of glory over her tent, and that represented the divine presence, how God was hovering over her tent. And these three miraculous things disappeared after Sarah died, and they returned when Rivka came back into the tent, these three miracles. These three miracles are also miracles that we see in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. And it's interesting that, so we see the menorah, it says, burnt brightly from night to night. And it was something that burnt and created a light throughout the world. The challah stayed fresh again. We have the challah that was in the Beit HaMikdash that they would bake, would stay fresh from week to week. And God's presence, the divine presence, was there. So these three things are showing us how the Beit HaMikdash, which is the holiest place, and it will be rebuilt very soon in our generation, we're waiting for that time. The Beit HaMikdash mimicked the Jewish home. Not the Jewish home mimicking the Beit HaMikdash, but the opposite. The holiest place in the world, God's place where he communicates to us, God's place where his presence is felt, is mimicking the Jewish home, the home of Sarah, which shows us that in Judaism, it's not the synagogue where it's at. I mean, you could have a beautiful synagogue, a beautiful shul, it's a nice community center, but the place where Judaism really shines is in the home, is in each of us homes. And it's always been in Judaism. This is the center. It's in the home that is the center. And of course, it's the woman who is the center of her home, who creates the environment of her home. So she's really the one who is cultivating that environment for the next generation and for everyone all around her. So these three mitzvot, these three miracles that were in Sarah's tent, we're told also represent three special mitzvot of the Jewish woman. And those are, well, let's start with Shabbat candles, right? We light the candles every Erev Shabbat before sunset, 18 minutes before sunset, we light the Shabbat candles, we say a blessing on it. And then what does it create? It creates a complete change in the environment. There's a complete transformation. Now you look at the room, it's exactly the same, right? If it was messy before, it's still messy now. If the kids were screaming before, they're still screaming now, right? But something has changed. You've just introduced a new light to the world. You've introduced a new holiness to the world. That Shabbat candle that you lit, from one moment to the next, you have created a change. And this is the power of our power to change and transform time. This is the idea how we transform time. The room is still the same room, but there's a new aura about it. There's a new holiness, peacefulness that descends into the room. That's Shabbat candles. The other mitzvah is challah. What happens with the challah? What do you do with the challah? You eat it? So it's interesting because the laws of idolatry are right next to the laws of challah. And it says there that a person who keeps the laws of challah, it's as if he completely uprooted the idolatry in his life.
Wow.
And what does challah have to do with idolatry? What is the comparison? Anyone?
No.
Because from the challah you can give to the Kohen, to the poor people, I think maybe that's part of it.
But why does that have to do with idols, idol worship, idolatry? So let's think. I mean, when you take that piece of challah, challah is the most basic of all foods. Bread, dough, Dough represents all kinds of money, endeavors, anything material, everything material. You got some bread, you got the basic food that you eat. So you're making challah, you're making this dough, you're making bread, the most mundane food that there is, the basic foods, and you're taking a piece out of that dough. You're taking this little piece from the dough. And what are you saying with that piece? A blessing. And what does that mean when you're saying a blessing? Well, you eat it, yeah, but what is that blessing? You don't eat that part. You don't eat that part. You give that, So today we just burn it but this is like a part, this is a part that we sanctify. Yeah, it's a part that we sanctify to God. We don't eat it today because we don't have a Beit HaMikdash or a Kohen. We just burn it. It's not because it's holy. It's not something.
Like maaser?
Yeah, like maaser that we give to poor people. So this would be something that we would give to the Kohen. Exactly. So nowadays we don't eat that part. We say the blessing, and that part is left in the oven to burn, and then afterwards we discard it. It's a little piece, a little fistful of. You learned something. So what does it mean when we're doing that? Like, what's the point of doing that? The point of it, what's the point of this mitzvah, is that we're saying, God, making challah, which is the most basic material thing, is not me. It's not me who did it. It's you. It's you who gave me the strength to do it. It's like saying a bracha when we eat something. You take that little piece and you're saying, this is not me. It's not me and my strength and the strength of my hand. It's not me who actually made the food. It's you who gave it to me. And I'm recognizing that. And I'm recognizing that even something like food, even something like challah, has to be made holy. It's not just about me eating the challah. I'm elevating the challah. That challah has to be used for something purposeful. So I'm taking that piece of challah, and that piece of challah is like this little elastic piece of faith that we each have, that faith that's within us. And we take that faith that's within us, that faith that realizes that, God, there's only you in this world, and things that I'm doing, things that I'm able to do, is only because you give me that strength. And therefore, I cannot just use food as a regular mundane thing, but I need to use the food for good things. I need to let the food, the energy, help me to do good things. So I'm taking that piece of challah, and that's that little piece of me, that little piece of faith that each of us have, that part of us that says we're connected to God. And I'm saying we're connected to God. This is not just about me. And so how does this uproot idolatry? Because what is idolatry? Idolatry is saying that there's powers other than God. There's things other than God. And we can have a lot of idols. We can have all different kinds of idols that we worship. And I think, I was reading an article today how it was saying how a lot of the idols that we have been smashed. We had the idols of the Ivy Leagues, the Ivy League universities. That's the important things, having your degree. And now we learned, oh, hold on. They don't really know morality. We have the idols of Hollywood. Where's all the stars condemning what's happening right now? And we don't have that. We have the idols of the newscasters who are telling us the news. Well, all of a sudden the news is very slanted and it's not real at all. So a lot of these idols that we have, and we can all have different idols, and we all have idols in our own lives of people who we feel are powerful, people who we feel we need to subjugate ourselves to, people who we feel we need to bow down to, even things that we bow down to, society's rules, and Judaism, we have to hide it because society is stronger. This is all idols. And we're taking that facade of idolatry and we're saying, we're throwing it out. We're saying this is not what we are. We are the children of Abraham and Sarah. We are the children of our avos and imahos, our patriarchs and matriarchs. And we know where it's at. We have that light. So by taking that piece of challah, that is what you're doing. You're acknowledging that this challah is not you. It's not you who made it. It's God who gave you the ability to make it. And all physical reality is not just, because challah represents really all physical reality. All physical reality is something that there's only God in this world, God and God alone. And that is the only power that is. When you think that other people have power over you, when you think other ideologies have power over you, when you think that other things have power over you, that's serving an idol, right? Because it's only God. Everything that happens in the world is only because God allows it to happen. Not only allows it, but actually orchestrates it to happen. So, then you can have a whole lot of questions. Well, why did God do this or that, right?
Exactly.
That's another discussion, and that's a whole discussion, and that's a very valid question. But that's a different discussion. But it is all God who is the only things that can happen is when God wants it to happen. And that's what we acknowledge when we take that little piece of challah. So it's that little piece of elastic faith within us, that faith that can be smushed, that faith that could be going through a lot of difficulties, a lot of questions sometimes, that faith that sometimes feels very slippery, but it's that faith that we each have within us. And that's what we do when we say the challah. That's what we're doing. And that's the mitzvah of challah. So challah, while Shabbos elevates time, challah elevates material reality, all physical reality. It represents all physical reality. So as a woman, we then are elevating time with Shabbat, and we're making time different. We think that we're fixed in time, and Shabbat is coming to tell us you're not fixed in time. Time is not imprisonating you. You have control over the time and over how you look at the time. And time can be seen as completely different. It doesn't have to be just mundane. It could be Shabbat. It could be a holy period of time. And we're seeing the same thing with challah, with material reality, with physical reality, with material sustenance. We're taking that challah and we're saying challah is something that's a physical thing, and now it's more than just a physical thing. It's something that can be used and elevated for godliness. And finally, the third mitzvah is the mitzvah of mikvah, where we see that it says God's presence was in Sarah's tent, and this represents how God is in our lives, and this represents the mitzvah of mikvah. So the mitzvah of mikvah is that after a woman's period, she then counts a certain amount of days, and then she immerses in the mikvah. During that time period, husband and wife cannot have physical contact. And after she immerses in the mikvah, the husband and wife can reunite in intimacy. And mikvah is supposed to be a very special, it's like the honeymoon that you can experience monthly, a very special time where husband and wife again reunite. Now, again, what are we doing with this mitzvah of mikvah? So there's many levels. I mean, on a psychological level, the reason why mikvah is given is to make, it says, so a husband will always feel endeared to his wife. Something that you always have, something that you're used to, you're not excited about anymore.
Excuse me, can a mikvah be for a man too? Or just
There are mikvahs for men as well. That's a different mitzvah, but this special is a mitzvah that's specifically for women. There are men's mikvahs, and men will go to mikvah before Shabbos in order to elevate themselves and purify themselves. We have mikvah for dishes even, that we immerse dishes in the mikvah in order to bring it to a higher level. A convert who converts to Judaism will also go to the mikvah. So these are all different usages.
You could convert and go into the mikvah.
You go into
Anybody, it's hard to be Jewish to convert.
Yeah. So these are all different ways. Like mikvah is used to elevate a person's status, to elevate a person's, to prepare a person for a higher level of spirituality. That's what it's used for. That's why a man will go in on before Shabbat to elevate himself. He'll go in the morning before prayer.
Is it a different place, or is it not just the men go
The women's is a lot nicer.
Where do the men go to?
Depending on,
Sometimes the basement of the shul.
yes, yeah, we don't want to share it because we like our mikvahs nice and clean and pristine and luxurious. Yeah, and we like it like, you know, it's our own. Who wants to have a man going into your place? So it's our own special place.
You have a mikvah in my house too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, some people do have mikvahs. You know, there's a lot of laws.
It's like a small little like.
Well, there's a lot of laws for women's mikvah specifically, so it's important to go to a kosher mikvah for when a woman does this for this mitzvah. A man is not as stringent the kind of mikvah that he goes to, so it's easier.
Yeah,
but-
not kosher.
Mhm. Well, there's mikvahs that aren't real mikvahs, like it's not done properly. It has to be done with rainwater, with, you know, getting the rainwater.
Chemicals in it, right? So they put
Well, it has to be you can have some chemicals, but there's got to be, it's got to be living waters. It's called, meaning it has to touch with the rainwaters that come through. There's like a whole bunch of complicated ways
So how do they get the rainwater in there? They can use that.
through, like some kind of drains or something that goes. It has to touch it. Yeah. Time to go.
Archaeologically, sometimes a mikvah is what they want found in archaeological material.
So back to this mikvah. So what is this idea of mikvah? So again, there's a lot of psychological benefits in terms of couples and intimate relations between couples. I was once doing a talk on mikvah and I was explaining the beauties of mikvah, and there was a sex therapist there and she was like, wow, this is the most incredible thing. I never heard about it. I'm going to tell all my clients, like, this is great. This is like,
Also, the cycle of fertility also.
yeah, the cycle of fertility. So there's a lot of different aspects, and we can do a whole mini series class on mikvah. But I want to bring out one part of the mikvah here, and that is that what is the idea of mikvah? The idea of mikvah is that what we're saying is a woman is going to the mikvah. She's saying, God, this is my most important relationship. Husband and wife relationship should be the most important relationship ever. We're building a family with this. We're building a home together. I want you part of it. I'm inviting you into that relationship. I'm inviting you into my interpersonal relationships, and that you should be a part of it. That because when I'm going through such, oh, she made it back. when I'm doing something that's so integral to life, to holiness, God, I want you part of that relationship. And mikvah is something that if you haven't gone when you were fertile, when you had your period, it's something that you can always go one last time. And because it's something spiritual, it works retroactively. See, spirituality is not something that's linear. Spirituality is something that's not in one time or place. Spirituality is something that's in many multi-times and spaces. So by doing something spiritual, you can actually change around all the past that was done and have the blessings from this mitzvah.
Is that the Princess of Dan?
Is that what?
Princess of Dan?
Princess of Dan?
Is that the name of the book? Retroactive, how it affects from one, like, even lifetime to another.
Oh, interesting. I don't know that book, but yeah, spirituality is like that. Like we don't, we look at things in a very linear way, but spirituality is something that infuses all of reality. God is not here. God is in the past, in the present, and the future. And so too, spirituality can affect things in that way. So we can actually change around. And you can understand it because, even when you do something wrong and that motivates you for something positive, the thing that you did wrong is actually something good. So you can see that. Let's say you did something really horrible in your relationship, and that caused you to get into this huge fight, and that caused you to decide, okay, I'm going to counseling because really my relationship is not where I want it to be. So that act that you did, which you thought was so horrible, is actually the impetus for something so positive because it caused you to change your life around. So you can see even in a spiritual sense how something negative can be changed into something the most positive possible. And that's the concept really of Teshuvah as well. But in this sense, what we're saying is it can actually change around. So I would urge you, if you haven't ever gone, now's the time. Now's a perfect time. Yeah, sure.
So why does it stop after a woman stops getting a period?
Right.
Why does that mitzvah stop?
It's a great question. So it's on everything has so many layers. On a physical sense, the point is that when a husband and wife, when you're newlyweds, you shouldn't just be into the physical body. Take time to appreciate the emotional aspects of one another as well. As you get older, hopefully you've gotten used to that. And the emotional aspects are stronger and more developed. And it's not just like a physical thing that, a kiss can cover over or a hug can cover over. But you actually get to know each other and work through things. And that's hopefully how it gets. So that's on a very emotional level. On a cosmic spiritual level, like again, everything is layers in Judaism. So on a cosmic level, the idea of a woman's separation from her husband, that whole time period, is compared to Galut and the Jewish people. How we were separated from our cosmic spouse, from God. And the idea is that in the time of Mashiach, we are then united for all times. The whole point of these separations of Galus, of this exile, is not for punishment. We say this many times. It's not just because we've done sins and God is punishing us. The point of a separation from God is to draw us closer, for us to find the depths of our real self, to find deep, deep within ourselves who we really are. And we see that so clearly now. Like the depths of the Jewish people have been squeezed, we've been squeezed, and the insides have come out. And that's why everyone's so into mitzvot and so into unity, because the Jewish people have been squeezed so much now with what had happened, with the tragedy, with the massacre. And as a result, something deep inside of us gushed open. Like things that people can't even understand or explain. Like, why is it that now I feel so connected to everyone?
Activated.
It's been activated, exactly. We've been squeezed and it's activated, and now we feel we want to do something. We want to do a mitzvah. We want to do a connection. We want to have the unity. We want to daven. We want to pray. We want this connection with God, the God that did this to us, right? So when it is this part of us that becomes activated. So that's the point of Gullus. The point of Gullus is that it creates a connection within us that we didn't even know we had with God. And it activates this connection. And it gets us closer to this connection. We're going through a process. It's not just punishing, but we're going through a process. And that's why we're getting to the end of this process. And the end of the process, the culmination of the process, is when Mashiach comes and we're no longer separated from God forever, for all times. And that resembles actually the time period of menopause on a physical level, where the couple is then together and there's no separation. You don't need the separation for the growth anymore, because you've reached a point in time where there's this tremendous connection between you and God, or tremendous connection between you and your spouse, that you don't need those periods of separation to help you work on the emotional aspects of the relationship and the other aspects of the relationship. The unity is there for all times. So,
One more question?
Sure.
What happens when you just go shopping and you buy challah? Do you get the mitzvah?
it's great. You say a blessing on the challah.
It's not a mitzvah.
It's also a mitzvah. You're eating kosher and you're saying a blessing on the challah, and that's also beautiful.
Business owners and business.
And they did the mitzvah, like kosher challah. Someone has done that mitzvah on the challah.
Because I feel very special when I go and buy a challah, or even when my husband goes to buy a challah. You still
100%, for sure,
to get ready for Shabbos.
for sure, absolutely.
Especially if it's fresh baked.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. But when you come to the challah bake that Chani's going to organize, then you'll feel that, you'll understand why you're doing that mitzvah, and you'll feel that connection. So, so it doesn't have to be every week, but it's something that it's nice to do once in a while to actually get that mitzvah, to have that connection. Okay, so let's just to summarize. This week on Parshas Chayesara, we have the special 3 mitzvot of women. These are the mitzvot that came back to her tent when Rivka entered the tent, and these are the mitzvot that each and every one of us have as our own personal arsenal to create these bombs of light, these beams of light in the darkness of our world. And it's through these mitzvot that we've created the light of the Jewish home, which is the envy of the world, because there's nothing like the Jewish home. And it's that light and spirituality that we will conquer this spiritual war around us, and the negativity and the darkness that's around us, and infuse it with these beautiful mitzvot.
Pastor Sandy, what about all these people that say,